Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting and study session for the evening June 24th, 2025 of the Fort Smith Board of Directors. In the absence of the mayor and the vice mayor, the Board of Directors needs to decide amongst themselves for a chairperson for the evening.
I would nominate Kevin Settle.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further nominations?
No, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, the first thing we'll do is we'll begin with our special meeting. I'll ask the city clerk to call the roll.
Directors Rigo, Good,
Here.
Kemp,
Here.
George Katsavas,
Here.
Christina Katsavas, Settle,
Here.
Martin.
Here.
There's quorum tonight. Is there any presentation by the Board of Directors not on the agenda for tonight? Seeing none, we'll go to item number 1. Jeff?
Item number 1 is a resolution accepting and filing the external auditor's report on the city's financial statements, uniform guidance audit, and report on the city's compliance with certain state acts for the year ended December 31st, 2024. Chief Financial Officer, Andy Richards is coming to the table, and
Dina Enfield.
The chair of the Audit Advisory Committee, Dina Enfield, is also here to present tonight's discussion.
Welcome both. Glad to have you all here.
I'll let our audit committee chairman make her comments and answer whatever questions you guys have.
Good. Hi. Close. Okay. Thanks. Dina Enfield, a member and current chair of the Audit Advisory Committee. And we, as the Audit Committee, met with the external auditors several weeks ago to discuss drafts. We do have the annual comprehensive financial report for the city on the year ended 12/31/24. This has been audited by Forvis Mazars, and we are receiving an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. The ACFR is prepared by your CFO, Andy Richards. Included in this report is a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 23 ACFR that is received from the Government Finance Officers Association. A few things of highlights to point out in the report. This has, at the end of the year, 12/31/24, there's a total net position that increased about $51.1 million from 23, and there is an unassigned fund balance of the general fund of about $12.1 million as of year end. In addition to that, there is an assignment of approximately $22.6 million of commitments that have been obligated in 24 that will be spent in 25. That would be an item of note. In the ACFR, one of the schedules, it will be at page 167 of the report, has 114% for the debt service coverage ratio, which is over the 110% minimum mark, and increased from 108% in the prior year. Also, as part of this audit, there are governmental and single audit or reports under the Uniform Compliance Standards that is audited also by Forvis Mazars. There is no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in these noted in these reports. We are receiving an unmodified opinion on our major federal programs that were tested. Of the programs tested, they tested four programs, which accounts for 63% of the total federal awards of the city for 24. With that, those are kind of the overall comments that I have. And as the Audit Advisory Committee, we would be asking the board to accept the results of the audit and allow the staff to file this when ready by the end of the month in order to meet all reporting deadlines.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Andy, you want to add anything to the comments?
Just one thing I want to highlight that Ms. Infield mentioned. So the general fund balance, we reported that. So total fund balance was $35.4 million, and that represents about 48% of our annual expenditures and transfers for the year. That's the total. The unassigned portion of that, we classified that as $12 million, which is about 12% of our total expenditures and fund transfers. And so typically that's, you know, we're used to seeing that number in the 20s and 30s. The one thing that's kind of new this year was there's a classification for an assignment for subsequent year's budget. So the way the standards are written, the motion or the action by the board to appropriate funds for the next year where the revenues are below the expenditures is an act of the board is assigning our 24 fund balance to cover the next year's deficit. So the amount that was assigned for subsequent year's budget was $22.7 million. And so that is something that's kind of new. We haven't had, you know, and that number comes straight from the amended budget that was passed in May when we did the budget cuts. So that's the figure. That's what that represents. So I just wanted to point that out to the board, make sure everybody understood that. Something kind of new for this year.
We got citizens comment next, and then we'll ask questions. Is that okay? So, City Clerk, is there any citizens that wish to make a comment on tonight's item?
Yes, we have one individual, Joey McCutcheon. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. McCutcheon, if you would just stand and speak to the board, I appreciate it.
Okay. And I'm going to, in full disclosure, this is from an accounting friend of mine, and I don't know the answers, but I'm just going to kind of read.
There's your microphone, Mr. McCutcheon, if you like it.
Oh, thank you. I'll get on my knee for you, Kevin. Oh, okay. All right. And again, I haven't studied this fully, but I do have questions. There were expenses that were carried over from 24 into 25. Because they were officially 24 expenses, the city is obligated to show those expenses of 22 and something million in the financials. The expenditures are under the general fund and need to be debited against the revenue, and eats up monies and places the city under the 20% they are supposed to maintain according to what the board implemented a few years ago. And what I'm interested in is what does the city need to, what percentage does the city need to maintain in the general fund? And I would like to know also how much of a hit the general fund is going to take and where the city expensed the $22 million. I hope that makes sense, but I'm not a financial person, but it seems to me there's some concerns raised here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCutcheon. Is that, Andy, what you were talking about, the change that were, that,
Yeah.
okay, the carryovers?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I followed what you were saying, and I understand that. The comment about there being 24 expenditures, all 24 expenditures are already counted.
Okay.
But we did carry over a lot of budgeted of the 24 budget that weren't spent, weren't expended. So I think that's what they're referring to. I think he's referring to the $22 million that we assigned for the subsequent year's budget.
That's the carryovers in,
Part of it's carryover, and part of it was buying the building, and there's a lot of things in there.
Okay. Before we any more comments, I need a motion to adopt the resolution.
so moved.
and second by Director Good. Any director's comment? Director Martin?
Yeah, so last week I did communicate to the board that $22 million. And really what that is carryovers. That is the purchase of the building. There's a number of things that happened in 24 that didn't necessarily take place until 25. And I think what that does mean to the board is we've got to be very conscious of the general fund in 25. And we do have those financial, they're set by the board, financial policies, yes. Yep. So if we get under 20%, this happens. If we get under 15%, this happens. So I think one of the things that we've got to do is just be very mindful of the general fund as we're moving forward in 25. And if it falls below those things, we cut capital. And then if it gets further than that, then we cut people. That's when we get into personnel. So those things are set in place by the board, and we've got to be mindful of those. And I think the other thing that I did want to make mention of is the 114% that Ms. Enfield made reference to. When we fell below that, we fell below that in 23, and we were on pace to fall significantly below that in 24 due to rising inflation, significant rise in inflation in 24. So I think we were on target for like 40%. Is that where do you remember what we were on target for in terms of the debt service coverage ratio? Had we not made had we not had the rate increase, the water rate increase? Do you remember what that was?
I think we were projecting it in the 80s.
Oh, we were in the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was lower than that.
It moved some, but that's about where it was.
But at any rate, we had the rates go into effect middle of the year. That allowed us to be able to hit the 114%. And then in 25, we should have a full year of those rates in place that should allow us to be well above 110, well above 114. So I think we're in a much better spot in terms of hitting our debt service coverage ratio, especially as it relates to water rates, and not seeing a rate increase on the horizon, at least at this point, to be able to cover that. So I'm pleased about that. It's just going back to that $22 million general fund. It's something that just we've got to be mindful of and be careful of when we go and we start talking about general fund dollars being spent. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Ms. Enfield said and just what Mr. Richards has said as well.
And when will we have our first 6-month update? Because I think, is it end of this month we'll have our first 6 months of this year update?
Yeah, I think we've got it planned for is it like the last week of July?
Yes, I mean, and that's one of the items for me to cover this evening to set is that we are trying to set a budget review and a priority strategic session towards the end of July, the 29th, that last Tuesday, to give Andy time to finish the numbers through the end of June. You'll need July to compile that.
Director Good, then Director Kemp.
Just a quick comment, sitting in on the meeting. David Coleman and Katie Flores presented, and they spoke very highly of the department and Andy and the work that they've done. Said it was a much better and smoother transition now that processing the act for now that those the bank reconciliations were done and out of the way. So they thanked the city board as well as thanking the staff for doing such a great job.
Thank you. Andy, when we talk about the $22.7 million assigned from the 2024 budget, and I know that you spoke just a second ago, you said that it included the building purchase. Is that really a 2024 expense?
No.
Okay.
It's this is what's kind of weird is that we're reporting our 24 fund balance for the general fund, but we're assigning a portion of that to 2025's budget to make up the shortfall that we've budgeted for in 25.
Okay.
The shortfall being expenditures exceeding revenues by 22.7.
Is there a way for us, or is there a public already on the site, or is there a way for the board to have a breakdown of the 22.7, like in a simple rundown, like it's these projects and this much is funding the 25 budget?
I mean, we could sit here and talk about here's what kind of attributed to this, but it is the 22.7 is just an accumulation of every budgeted expenditure appropriated for 25 and every forecasted revenue for 25. I mean, I think the original deficit was when we passed the budget in December was 5.7 million.
Okay.
And then we talked about the carryovers from 24 into the 25 budget. That added to probably another 10 million.
Okay, so we're at
And
15.
then we decided to buy the building. We made it a budget adjustment after we passed the budget to buy the building.
Yeah, I see, and that's what
A lot
that
of these-
comprises.
yeah,
I
there's
see.
a lot of
that
things
helps me
happening.
understand.
Yeah.
I don't need a document. I wanted to kind of talk about it, and I appreciate you breaking that down a little further. And then, if I'm understanding correct, this just for us to kind of gauge, based on this 12% is where we are right now. But with the budget cuts or even the freeze.
Well, that was at the end of the year.
At the end of the year, yeah. But,
End of last
but
year.
With our,
And it's not exactly the same
12
calculation
it is not.
either.
It's
not
not.
exactly the same one.
So with the budget cuts and with our freeze that we implemented and things, we feel like we can get this back to 20%, correct?
Yes, yes.
We are close to 20% even with those.
We're at 17 something, wasn't it?
Yeah, with the budget cuts with that 22.
That's all I have. Thank you.
So before we go, any other director, any comments or questions? Go ahead, Neil.
Well, and I would just encourage city administration to do everything we can to get above that 20%. I think that's important for us to make sure that we're on sound footing. So just that would be my recommendation for the city.
So because this is new, because you said it was new, typically you don't do this.
Right.
Because we're doing this, so theoretically, if there was no projects for carryover from 25 to 26, your fund balance would grow tremendously. Because if you don't have any carryover projects, if we don't carry projects from 25 to 26, all the revenue come in is sitting there for just general fund balance, in theory.
Right.
Okay. So that's because you had so many more projects. That's the reason why. And you're trying to compare something that happened in December 31st to into June. Is where we're kind of at right now. Okay. Any comments or questions? Director Good?
Yeah, just one final comment, because I took notes, and it was a question that was asked during the meeting, during the audit meeting. What could we do? What could our group, the audit committee group, do and the board do to promote and shape the appearance of stability? Because we're talking about questionable, where we are in percentages. And so we talked about that just for a moment. LaVon Morton was in the audience. And one of the things that was brought up is we could do press releases on as much good news as we can. And I know that we do that pretty much online, on social media, but any other ways that we can think of promoting ourselves and promoting the good news. The comments were made by Forrest that we were going in the right direction. Auditing and grants, we're in good hands. We are in compliance, and in my opinion, the report was really well done.
The last thing is, you said at the very beginning, if we didn't do it this new way, we'd been at 48% fund balance. Is that correct?
Well, if we hadn't budgeted the deficit.
Yeah. But
We've never had a deficit
but it would
of
have
that
been
magnitude.
But if we had been at normal comparison year on year,
Would
been
be
48%.
it would be at $34 million.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I
Director
do want to echo what Director Good said, because I'm also on the audit committee. I think the Forvis Mazars had it was very favorable, the audit and the numbers as they set today. I think they did say a lot of good words to Andy and his team. We got a chance to meet with them privately. We got a chance to meet with Forvis Mazars privately, and I think this audit is good. I think they didn't have necessarily any issues with it. It's just things for this $22 million, something that we need to be conscious of, and that was the first big thing, and the other was the 114% debt service coverage ratio that I think is very positive, especially as we were ending 2024.
Very good. Any other comments from the board? If not, we'll take a vote. Ask City Clerk to call the roll.
Directors Good,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
George Katsavas, Settle,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Passes 5 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Deanna. With that, I need a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Special meeting is adjourned. We'll go to our regular scheduled study session tonight. We've got 3 items. We'll go to item number 1, review of the consent decree 2024 annual report. Jeff?
Yeah, coming to the table to present this item is Lance McAvoy, Director of Water Utilities.
Good evening. First, I want to thank Director Settle and Director Martin for actually requesting this. I think this is something that the public needs to hear. The board definitely needs to understand where we're at. I've got a slide presentation. I'm going to go through the first portion of this fairly quick. This presentation is broken into 3 parts. 1, what is the consent decree? That's what this is. Yep. So you each have a copy of this at your desk along with other handouts, and I'll touch on those as we go. But what do we have to do to comply with the consent decree right now? The 2024 report, which is what you two asked for, and then where are we right now in 2025, and what's the plan to move forward? So what's our plan for success? So, sorry about that. Basically, some of these slides you may remember from when we actually talked about rate increases, but we are not in compliance with the Clean Water Act. And it's due to the fact we have sanitary sewer overflows. It's due to pipes that have not been repaired over decades, and some of the pipes are too small. So we need to make sure we do the right maintenance on those, the treatment plant and pump stations. This actually starts in 91, and as Director Martin knows, we actually go farther back than that. 91 was actually about the time we got out of our first consent decree and the new administrative order was issued. So we actually had a consent decree in the 80s. The city met those requirements, actually litigated some of that to get out of the consent decree, and then we moved forward, and that kind of put us where we're at now. The consent decree, again, is an agreement between the city, EPA, the Department of Justice, and the state of Arkansas to reduce our sanitary sewer overflows and to bring us in compliance with the Clean Water Act. And we have to do a lot of different things, capacity assessments, line assessments, things of that nature. Sanitary sewer overflows is a big topic, and we've heard a lot about that. It's basically when you have backup of sewer in a home that's caused by not the private service line, but by the city's line backing all the way up into the home, or exiting through a manhole, because that's going to be the weakest point. Pipe's underground, it's kind of contained, so where's it going to go? It's going to go to the weakest area, and believe it or not, a manhole, the lid on it is less than what the power of the soil is around the pipe. That's why the pipes don't normally burst that are underground. We have 2 different types. We have wet weather. That's a capacity issue from inflow and infiltration. Inflow is when somebody has directly hooked stormwater into the sanitary sewer. That's inflow. Infiltration is cracks in the pipe where water is allowed to seep in, so it infiltrates. Dry, there's no rain going on. This is just a blockage or a defect in the line. So, sorry. Dry weather SSOs, I wanted to bring this up. This is part of what I want you to understand. We had 105 events of dry weather SSOs in 2024. We had more dry weather than we did wet weather. It was a little bit drier year, but the fact of the matter is they fell into 7 different areas. When you look at the debris and line break, that's because the pipe is deteriorating. There's cracks, there's hole in the pipe, it allows dirt, rocks to get in there, that's the debris. Line breaks are just that. The line broke down, it collapsed. Sinkholes would be a cause of a line break. So that causes that. Grease, that is where we're trying to clean, and we'll touch on grease in a little bit, but that's from people dumping oils and grease, fats, oils, and grease down the drain. It accumulates on the walls, causes the pipe to constrict, and eventually you have an overflow. Roots, if there's a crack or a a way for a root to get in. You've got a source of water and you've got a source of nutrients. Roots love sewer lines. Contractor that's up there, we've actually had, last year, we had 2 boring contractors that were not doing work for the city of Fort Smith hit our lines. They bored through our lines. We have to report that, but I will tell the board, we have a policy that if they do that, they have to not only pay for the repair, but they pay for the penalty that is associated with an SSO, because we are not going to allow that to be passed on to the citizens. We're not sure what caused that. We went out and did our investigation. We had the SSO, but whatever was there that caused it is gone. This is an actual photo of one of our lines. When we were doing CCTV, you could see that there's a blockage in here, an offset pipe, fats, oil, and grease buildup. There's a whole bunch. In fact, we had to abandon this survey. When we do this, we actually use a NASCO scoring. It's a national and international way of looking at the structure of the pipe, and it's on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. And in the consent decree, we have to fix all 4s and 5 defects. Structural defects, because there's also maintenance defects. So if you hear somebody say, well, what was the maintenance defect? That is something like we can clean it. So we don't have to, we have to go in and clean the line. We don't have to rip that line out of the ground. So we look at those types of things. All of the SSA work, sanitary sewer assessments, were supposed to be completed at the end of 2022. But we had COVID for 2 years, and that really slowed things down. So if you take the 2 years that we lost and add it to 2022, guess what? We got them all done in 2024, and you'll see a graphic on that in a moment. After we do the assessment, we have to come up with what's called a remedial plan. That plan is then sent to EPA for their approval. So we wait on their approval. When they approve it, we then get it to a design engineer firm who determines, hey, are you going to do cure in place? Or, is a point repair, open cut, how are you going to repair it? Designs it, and then we put it out for bid. So this isn't just a simple, we look and see how bad it is, and then immediately we fix it. Sometimes we do that if it's a major, if we have a collapsed line, a line break that's causing a sinkhole, something like that, we will go in if we can and fix it, or we will come to the board with an emergency contract, which is, most of you know, we have done in the past. The other part is capacity. So this is actually Basin 10 and 14, Phase 1. Some of you visited the site. I did not want to put your pictures in there because, I wanted to protect the innocent. But, yeah, those are people down there. That gives you an idea on how deep that is and how big that pipe is. It's a 36-inch pipe, I believe, at that point. And, we have to look at making sure that all the water is able to travel through the pipe, depending upon the pipe size.
This is just south of North O, right?
Yeah, this is over by Martin Luther King Park, just east of there. Another one that we did, and I'll mention it a little bit later on, is Basin 10 and 14 Phase 3, which is at the Kelly Ball Fields. So now we don't have SSOs at the Kelly Ball Fields anymore. And we'll talk about that here in just a bit. There is also a capacity management, operations, and maintenance section. And this is basically how will the utility department run going forward. This is a accepted way of doing things, and some of the things are FOG program. So in front of you is a FOG kit. If you already have a FOG kit and do not want another one at the end of the meeting, I recommend you give it to one of our citizens who don't have one. But I've provided that for you. And there will be some other talks on FOG coming up. Root control. So I want to point this top picture. You see the hanging, you see the white. That is actually fog that's stuck on the walls. And that will, that just keeps building up, constricting that pipe down. And pretty soon, it's a lot like the arteries in your system. If you eat a lot of cholesterol, a lot of fatty food, what happens to your arteries? The same thing happens to our pipes if you dump fog down it. This is a root. That's a root medium joint coming in. And we have to get that out because guess what? Fog loves roots because it will cling to it. If you hear about flushable wipes, this is not part of the consent decree, but flushable wipes are not flushable. If it's not toilet paper or a bodily fluid, do not put it down the toilet. The flushable wipes are actually several of those are under lawsuits because they'll hang up on roots, they get into pumps, they jam up pumps. That's part of the operation and maintenance side that actually drives up cost. We have to do cleaning. So, we want to clean that fog out, get rid of those roots. Evaluate our system. So I mentioned that we got the initial SSA work done. Well, in a couple of years, we got to start over, and it's going to be forever. Now, the nice thing is we've got the worst of the things identified to fix. So that cost to repair those will decrease exponentially over time. But we want to make sure, just like a car, you don't want to change the oil once and call it good. You got to keep changing the oil. It's preventative maintenance. Pump station and force main, make sure those are working. Capacity assessment, making sure the pipes are the right size as we grow. Sanitary sewer response, we want to make sure that we are actually responding to those and cleaning those up. Director Good actually called me about one on Grand Avenue. We responded to it, and we actually found what was really causing the problem, and we fixed it, and it hasn't overflowed since. Our computer systems on how we monitor data, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Standard operating procedures and training, we need to make sure that we're all doing the work the same way. And our inventory management program. We want to make sure we have the parts we need when we need them. We don't want to have, a widget if we need a ball bearing. Another item is the private service line program. This is where smoke testing occurs. This is actually a private service lateral. So this goes to a structure that has a crack in it, and when we do smoke testing, the smoke comes up through the ground, and that's where we know there is a defect in that line. We then send that out to the public, to whoever the structure belongs to, and they are required to fix it under our city ordinances. We do currently have a SEP program, Supplemental Environmental Project, that helps low-income homeowners who are living in the house to fix their service lateral issues. Of course, we have reporting. There are several other items. This is my consent decree book. You can tell it's well loved and well marked up. Several of the items I'm not discussing, we've already done those in the past years. It was a one-time event. If you want to go through page by page on that, that's going to be about a 2-hour study session. I wanted to be mindful of your time and everyone else's. But we have already completed a lot of things that were in there. Is there any questions before I go on to the 24? That's just kind of a brief overview of what we're required to do. Okay. Annual consent decree report. So what does that do? What did we accomplish? It's basically our report card telling all the good things that we've done. We did submit it to EPA, DOJ, and the state of Arkansas, and it was submitted on March 28th. These are due March 31st of every year. We have always made the deadline on that. 28th was a little bit closer than I wanted to have on this one, but again, we got that. We got confirmation from them, and they thanked us.
Do they have to accept it, or is...
They review it, and if there's questions, they can comment.
Okay.
I don't believe they accept the report itself. I think it's a review and comment.
Okay, thank you.
But there are parts that we have that we include with this, like the sanitary sewer assessment and the remedial measures plan that they have to approve.
Okay.
So some of the milestones, as I mentioned, we have now completed all of the SSA work. The initial SSA that was outlined here is complete. It was due in 22. We finished it in 24. We did file a force majeure for the COVID. I am checking with I was told that we did file one. I have not been able to find the paperwork. I actually had the state request that from me, and I'm getting with our lawyers to make sure they have a copy of it. But I want you to look at something. 84.33 miles of pipe was assessed. That's a lot of pipe because our entire system is 535 miles. And last year, we got it done. We completed 2,139 manhole assessments last year, And all of these blue basins that you see, that's where we did the work.
Isn't there, so for the 84 miles and the 2,000 manholes, we're required to meet a certain amount of miles and manholes every year. Is that correct?
Well, we were for the initial part.
Yeah.
We did not meet that for 20, 21, and 22. We did for 23 and 24.
Okay. So I guess we're behind on that, correct?
We're behind the 2 years, but we are now in compliance because it's complete.
Okay.
So, this is one of the first graphics that I have to show you, and this is something that I know Director Martin and I believe Director Rigo said they wanted to see, was some type of thermometer of being able to relay what's being done. And so we did this on the sanitary sewer assessment, the initial, and as of the end of 2024, we're at 100%. 10,209 manholes that were required by the consent decree. Now, there are newer manholes that were not required during this initial time frame. Same thing with linear feet of pipe. We have more linear feet of pipe than that, but again, it was not required. We're doing what was required. There were some additional assessments, but this is just what was required because we wanted to make sure that EPA, DOJ knew that we had met that.
That's 385 linear feet.
Yeah.
385 miles of linear feet. Yeah, miles.
Okay.
In our private service line, we found 627 defects. 477 were due to cleanouts. We had 7 downspouts plumbed directly in. And I will show you some photos in a little bit on that. And we had 143 private service lines that had cracks in them that we will be sending letters out to these owners. These are not just homeowners. Some of these are businesses that have this, and they have to fix it as well. This is one that I really want to kind of applaud the board, because the board is the one that helped us get this part done. We finished 3 projects last year, along with other projects that were underway, and we put out an additional 5 contracts. And this is really what EPA and DOJ is wanting to see. They're wanting to see work being done. They're wanting SSOs to be fixed. So this adds to that. And these 5 will be completed end of this year, middle Q1, a couple of them because we brought change orders. They found additional work that we need to do. So that's going to feed into the linear feet that they want to see repaired and the number of manholes repaired. So let me break down 24. 45,270 linear feet of pipe was replaced, repaired, or rehabilitated. Some of that work was done in-house. If it was a point repair and we could go fix it and televise it and show that it was repaired, we get credit for it. So the work that we're doing in-house helped out. We also did 523 manhole repair, replacements, or rehabilitations. Now, I want to put this in scope because some of you have seen the red line that went to EPA and DOJ, and we're waiting to hear back from them on. Originally, they wanted to see 45,000 linear feet a year and 150,000 linear feet every 3 years. So they wanted us to average 50,000, but they knew some years would be less, some would be more. Manholes, they wanted 500 manholes every 3 years. We did 500 manholes in 1 year. So we have met the 3-year requirement. And when I provided this information to them, they were actually a little shocked, I think. And it I may have smirked a little bit on that they were shocked by that. Some other ones, we did hydraulic modeling, so we have to put out flow metering. Where these stars are, that's where the flow meters were. These were the basins that were being assessed. The reason we do this is as we fix the pipe in the basin, we can see how much I&I we removed. And that's very key on capacity improvements. We did have to update our hydraulic model, and that's actually in process right now because the old software, it's no longer, it was server-based, everything, and I believe Director Martin can testify to this, everything's pretty much going to the cloud. And it's a great way, the cost drops, the initial cost drops, but you have the annual subscription fee. So I don't know where the break-even point is, but you also get the updated software all the time. And we are evaluating those modeled sanitary sewer overflows as part of our capacity assessment, and I'll discuss that here in a bit. Our FOG program. So, mentioned this. We inspect FOG generators, and those are food service establishments, schools, any place that has large commercial kitchens. We did 56% of the FOG generators were inspected last year. We're required to do 50 a year minimum and 100% every 2 years. Well, if you're over a little bit 1 year, EPA is not going to be upset if if we do 44% this year because we got that 100% in. But the thing that I found interesting was only 61.6 all round were actually 100% compliant. Now, that could mean that they messed up on paperwork, that they missed a cleaning schedule. It doesn't mean that they caused an SSO. However, that could be what one of those non-compliance for the 48.4% that were in non-compliance. That's where we're looking at is that. So 410 notices of violation went out. Now, that could, like I said, I forgot to train my people. We didn't have any problems. Everything's working right, but I didn't fill out the paperwork. We have to have the paperwork as part of it. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. That's an adage that I think all of you have heard in the past, and that's one that EPA, if they audit us and they want to look at those records and do a spot inspection, they're going to look and see if we've had a problem with that. We did 224 re-inspections, and we gave out 1,742 of these FOG kits to the public. These were given out at schools, at civic events, to civic groups where people went and spoke about FOG, and it is really a good way to educate everyone on kicking FOG to the can. Some other CMOM activities we did. Routes. So here's another route coming in. That's actually coming in a private service lateral into the main line. We do it two ways. One, we actually physically remove it, or we can do chemical treatment. The chemical treatment is used basically, there's a foam that is pushed into the pipe, and it gets into the roots, and the roots just kind of dry up, and then when we go to clean them again, they just break off, and it actually kills them past the edge of the pipe, but it doesn't go all the way up to the tree. We did 22 line segments, a little short of a mile of pipe, but the thing to notice is we remediated 14 SSOs that were being caused by roots by doing that. That was in the sewer line. It could have been from this. It could have been just in the sewer line, like that one tap root that I showed you. Those will also cause that.
But this is in the private sewer line, right?
No, this is in ours.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, we do this in ours. We do not get into treating private lines. We also do the physical removal. That's using what's called a jetter, high pressure water. We put it down, we bring it back. It kind of cuts the roots. We did 4 line segments last year, and that remediated 1 SSO. So we're looking at those dry weather SSOs and how do we reduce them? How do we get rid of them? And our staff is doing that. Cleaning. So we talked about cleaning. This is actually another FOG. You'll see deposits attached to grease. We had to abandon because it just was so bad. But you can see how much we've done of small and large diameter. The difference between small and large, if the pipe is less than 24 inches in diameter, it's considered small diameter. Anything 24 inches and larger is a large diameter pipe. So we did a lot of cleaning last year, and that helps. The targeted cleaning is where we know we have issues of FOG buildup, things of that nature. So we clean it more than once a year. We may do it quarterly. If it's really bad, we start really putting out flyers and stuff about fog in those neighborhoods to try to help break down the number of times we have to go out there. Our continued capacity assurance. So we are actually already working on capacity projects. I mentioned Basin 10 and 14, Phase 3. That was completed in, I believe, April of this year. April, maybe early May. There are 2 manholes that need to be abandoned. They're waiting until after the ball season is over, and they'll go in and abandon those manholes, but it's done. Skyline Estate project, it's under construction. We're waiting to get a permit to bore underneath a railroad track. But I mentioned us doing the modeling right now. That will show us where we may have other capacity needs going forward. And I want to identify those now, because if it's in a basin where we have not done work, let's upsize it while we're fixing the 4s and 5s instead of fixing a 4 and 5 and then going, oops, we need to now rip that brand new line out and put in, instead of a 10-inch, we need to put in a 12-inch. Let's identify that up front and save the time and the money. So we will have that. That's underway right now. And that actually did not begin until this year. Our SSO reporting, we reported every SSO on time, correctly. And I will tell you, it's interesting right now. The Division of Environmental Quality, DEQ, their database that we have to report online has a major challenge, if you will. And that's once we put data in and hit submit, we can't go back in and edit the data. So if we have a wet weather that takes it takes 2 days, we have to report it, but then we have to contact them by email so that they can go in and put when that, finish the form, because we can't do that. They are updating and we're actually going to be one of the beta testers for updating how SSOs are reported. And this is the number of days a year, and you'll see from 19 to 24, we are seeing a decrease in SSOs. Yes?
Are they ever looking at, one of the things I know in this discussion we've talked about before is if something happens at 11:30 p.m., and you have an event, and then at 4 in the morning the next day, those are 2 separate events. Are they ever looking at allowing, especially if a city's cooperating in good faith, for a 24-hour event to be like from its inception of the event to the ending of the event?
So to answer your question, we have actually requested that as part of the negotiated modification to look at the 24-hour event cycle, or to look at it as one event. And if it goes, up to 24 hours, because I think that would be.
But we're still waiting on their reply, correct, for that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Neil?
Let's compare this 155 to other cities. And I don't know if other cities are under the same reporting requirements that we are, but what would another city look like? Same age, same number of citizens. What would that look? I mean, do you have data?
I do not have data. I can get what there is a national survey that's done. It's not all inclusive, but I can get that information to the board.
Okay. Obviously, the goal is to get to zero.
Zero.
I would just like to see what that looks like.
I will tell you that most of the time it is gauged in number of sanitary sewer overflows per 100 miles.
Okay.
And we are probably not in the top 90 percentile for being good, because that would be, I've seen.
Say that again.
So if you look at, when they do it, they look at the worse you are, the higher the number per 100 miles.
Okay.
So if I have 535 miles and I had, 105 dry weather SSO events, you're looking at roughly 1 per mile, per 100, or
per 100 miles.
Per 100, or anyway, whereas some are looking at decimal places per 100 mile.
Okay. How many actual SSOs does this 155 days account for?
I would have to pull up my computer to get that for you.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah.
I think you might have said it at some point.
Yeah, I think we had 120, we had 105 dry weather, and I believe we had 26 wet weather last year.
Maybe
So
150.
Yeah, 131.
131,
And then that
okay.
was 155 because
Okay.
some of the wet weathers will take
Carried over.
multiple days.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our computer system, we do have a computer maintenance management system. It's a work order system. We have integrated that with our GIS, so it helps us to track stuff better. We're utilizing mobile tablets for work orders in the field instead of the old paper and trying to make sure everything gets entered back in. We've added the private service line program to better track it. Fog industrial pretreatment are also utilizing mobile tablets, and all the SSOs are tracked there. So it's one place shop that I can go and look at that and say, okay, here's, if you want, in fact, that would be something if you guys wanted to know how many we had thus far this month, I'd pull up my computer. I'd have to, because I'm on the private system here, I could look at that and get that number for you. We do training and standard operating procedures, SOPs. We actually continue to refine those, and we refined 2 SOPs last year. We look at multiples, but there were only 2 that we had to update. Actually had somebody ask me, I ran through this presentation with some people, and they said, well, explain why you would refine it. If you had problems with cholesterol and normally your recipe says use butter, and your doctor says, hey, use this canola oil-based margarine instead, well, you're going to change the recipe and not put butter in. You're going to say, use the canola oil-based margarine. That's the change in the recipe. It's the change in the standard operating procedure. I am too. I know my doctor would rather I not, but, and we did, for the staff that were trained, there's, almost 5,000 hours of training that we do.
And again, that training and those SOPs are mandated by the consent decree.
Yes.
And you guys are tracking them.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is the best management practice to have SOPs and to do the proper training. I wanted to show some of these photos of the private service line program. So the one that's up in the upper left-hand corner, that is an area drain. Basically, whenever it rained, all the water in that area just ran in there and ran straight into the sanitary sewer. And you think that might cause an SSO down the way, or have us falsely upsize a pipe to handle it? I love this one. It's on the, because you can't see what I'm pointing at, the one on the far right. That was very ingenious on how they plumbed their line, their downspout directly into their line. By the way, that and wherever you see that tied in an area drain like that, that is a violation of the state plumbing code. So it's not only us saying by ordinance, thou shalt not do this, you can't do this. We are just enforcing the state plumbing code on that. SEP, we only had 4 SEP projects last year, about $7,000. We have actually already this year are in the process of processing more than that because we are getting more of those notifications out from stuff that we found. And so we do have $267,755.08 left as of January 1 this year. As soon as that's gone, it's gone. That the SEP was a requirement of the consent decree. It was in lieu of penalties being assessed. Now, what happens when that money is gone? Well, some cities have, the boards have said, okay, we're going to allow a certain amount every year, but that would be a board decision on whether or not additional funds went for low income. And I will bring that to administration when we are out of money on that so that you're not blindsided by people calling you. Our reporting, we kind of talked about that. It was filed on time. It was placed on the city website. We did let people know. So you've got this at your desk. This was the billing insert that went in telling about our accomplishments for last year that our communications team put together. And we did social media posts throughout 24 on the work that was being done on the consent decree. And this kind of also talks a little bit about the volume of SSOs. 2019 we had 19.3 million gallons that was discharged. In 24, we were down to 5.4. So we are trending down, and you can see that the number of days also is trending down. Not just the overall events, but the days in which that's happening. And that's a testament to the great work that our response teams do when they're called out at 2 o'clock in the morning, that we have a sanitary sewer overflow, and they're going out and fixing that as quickly as possible.
So, so if we get an extension on the consent decree to 2037, are we going to push, is basically our goal of getting down to zero going to be 2037 in terms of gallons?
No. Our goal is to get it there as quickly as possible.
Okay. So we're operating, we're not just going to continue to go down until we hit zero in 2037. Our plan is to hit 0 gallons of SSOs prior to 2037. Do you have any idea of when that may be?
No, I really don't.
How could we get there? How could we get to where we can identify?
I think we can get there on wet weather SSOs way before that. I'm looking at 2030 or 2029 for wet weather.
Okay.
The issue with dry weather is you're always going to have people dumping grease.
Right.
You're always going to have.
And if we get, and if that's
There's
if
going
we
to be
can
a number,
categorize
yeah,
the
there's going to be a
wet
number
weather
that it plateaus at.
right. If we
be
can,
honest about it.
If we can, I think wet weather is kind of the thing that we tend to talk about the most.
There's going to be a plateau probably within the next 1 million or 2 gallons, and that's going to probably be the plateau.
Right. Well, I want to make sure that we.
I think to his point, you can have roots, fats, oils, and greases, things that still happen. That's going to cause backup on SSO. So there's going to be a number you get down to. It's going to go, and then you're going to kind of plateau, and then it's going to be harder to get those next numbers.
Basically, what you're saying is it's not up to us. It's not up to the city. It's up to people that generate fog. I mean, if I'm not going through proper protocols,
correct,
then I could generate an SSO. At my house, I could generate an SSO by pouring fats, oils, and grease down there. Okay, so I think we need to make sure that I think we need to look at those that we can affect.
Yes.
And getting that number to zero when that's going to happen.
And that's. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That's why I showed the cause. I showed for the dry weather SSOs way back several slides ago, where I pointed out the debris and the line collapse.
Right.
Those are the ones we should be controlling. Those, as we fix the pipe, those go away.
Right.
The fog, you have a bore contractor drill through your line.
Right.
We have no control over that. The other, we may or may not. It's just determining. The roots, we have some control over that as well.
Right.
But there's going to be, the two major ones are debris caused by line failure that washes down, that causes the dry weather at a later date and time. Those are the ones that we should be responsible
You
for.
said something about 2029.
2029, and I'll show that here in just a minute. Okay. That's when I'm trying to get all of the capacity projects done.
Okay.
Thank you. We talk about the SSOs and being penalized, being under consent decree. Most of that is, my understanding was that's because because of the Clean Water Act, it's getting to the river. So, is that misunderstood in thinking it that way?
Yeah. So,
and could you talk to that? There
are two different penalty groups. There are waters of the U.S. and the state of Arkansas, and then SSOs that do not reach waters of the U.S. or the state of Arkansas. So the easiest one is if you have one that's by a stream and it backs up, that's $1,500 a day, just because it's hitting the state. But if it backs up in your house and it's not going to touch the state of Arkansas, and it's not going to, it's not going in the river, that's going to be $750. So there is an actual differential in what the dry and wet weather, and that's why we track those separately, is because some of those actually have a different penalty to them.
So is it fair to say that the reason we're under a consent decree is a failed system altogether, not so much the dumping just sewage in the river, correct? I mean, you're describing faults that need to be fixed.
Yes.
Whether they make it to river water or stream water.
Or not, it needs to be fixed.
If we had never had that happen,
yeah,
you could still be under consent decree for backing up into houses.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's for not operating our system in compliance with the Clean Water Act.
Let's let you continue. It's 7 o'clock. Just keep eye on the time.
So I think we've got all that. I want to tell you where we're going, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So let's talk about a few things. I've been asked, where are we? What percent are we done? Well, we had to have all of the assessment done to know how bad the system was, to have a endpoint, so then I could do the assessment. We've completed 23% of the projects at the end of 24. We have another 11% of the line work that needs to be done is currently under contract. 16% is pretty much sitting on the shelf waiting for us to issue the bond to put out for contract, which means line work-wise, we've got 50% that we have to design and actually construct. Same thing with manholes, 34% fixed. We've got 2% that's under construction, 18% that, again, it's shovel-ready projects, and that takes us down to 46 that we have left to do. These were found to be 4s and 5s. So this brings us to the thermometer that Director Martin had hit me up about multiple times, and Director Rigo. Here's our thermometer, and these will be updated. This is the progress we're making, what's completed, what's under construction, what's under design, and what's pending.
So is this just, what we're seeing here is just the overall breakdown?
Of the line replacement, this doesn't include capacity projects, but of the line replacement that we know of from the SSA work that we have to fix.
Okay.
Capacity projects. So, Basin 10 and 14, Phase 3, we were still working on it this year, but it is now completed. Skyline Estates, I mentioned that. Basin 10 and 14, Phase 2, we're hoping to get that bid out. Those are sitting pretty much on the shelf. I think they're at, Jimmy, 95%, is that about right? Yeah, 95%. FLO1 is about the same. It's probably closer to 99%. As soon as those will be done about the time we get the bond money to bid out. Mazard Station and the basin, sub-basins 4 and basin 12, those are 29 projects. I will point out that we are going to be doing work in P004 and in this basin 12, and we want to make sure that we want to fix what we think we have, because where the line is that we think we have to upsize doesn't need to be upsized. We think once we fix it, it's going to take care of itself.
These are just capacity projects.
These are just capacity projects.
Just capacity.
So that's the 2029 that I was mentioning. What has the city done? And this is something that we've talked about with EPA, DOJ, and even the regional administrator, Region 6, when Jeff brought this up. This board and the citizens said, we want this fixed, and they passed sales and use tax and are allowing us to bond it. The board, being true to their word with EPA, said, okay, 3.5%, but that's all we're going to raise it. We've done that. Contingency went down and met with the new Region 6 administrator, Scott Mason. And later this year, we're going to put out our first bond for roughly $100 million, give or take, for construction and more design work. So we are moving forward. EPA has seen this. This is what they wanted to see. This is what DOJ wanted to see. So hopefully this will get them off center, and we'll get a response back from them.
Do we know when we can expect that response?
No. I expected it already. So, one of the things you ask is the decrease in SSOs. We are using asset management software to go forward. Before it was you assess a basin, you design the basin, you build the basin. The problem is if you have SSOs in a basin that's over here and you're working on designing this basin, your SSO is not getting fixed. So we're looking at both the likelihood or risk of failure with the consequence of failure. And we're utilizing different things like line break history, SSO history, the NASCO score. That goes into one pot and one weight. And then we look at other factors on the consequence. So if you have a 12-inch line that's running in front of a hospital and it's got a 4, and you got a 12-inch line that's running in front of 3 houses that has a 4, which one has the higher consequence of failure? Well, the hospital. So we are going to put our resources to where we have the greatest consequence. But at the same time, if you have an SSO in front of these 3 houses and you have no problems in front of the hospital, maybe you flip that because you want to get rid of that SSO first. This month, last Tuesday, we held an open house for contractors for the shovel-ready projects. Had the maps up. We had multiple contractors come in, and as they were leaving, tell me, man, I wish more cities would do this. This is great. This is helpful. I think we had, I want to say it was 12 or 15 contractors, some of which have never done work in the city of Fort Smith, traveled in for this and are excited about what we have and are wanting to work with us. The more contractors we have, the lower the bids are going to be.
Well, we know why they're excited. They're going to get paid.
Yeah, they're going to get paid. But
I'd be there too.
But if you only have 1 bid or 2 bids, you know, the more competition drives that price down. Today, we held an open house for design engineers to go over just this item. So the one on the left was the contractor, but look at the design engineers. That was 50 people in that room today. And they came from all over the state. Some of them flat out said, you know, we don't do this type of work, but we're interested if you have pump station work that might need to be done, which we do. That's also in there, but that wasn't what we were meeting on. But now we have some really good mechanical, electrical engineers that may be able to help us on some other projects. Annual report. I'm going to go over the communication plan, and Josh is ready to jump in if you have any questions for him. But this is something that he and I and his staff worked on together. Starting in 25, well, we got the bill. That's actually been ongoing. But one thing that he thought would be good for the 2025 annual report would to be a 5-minute video that we could run on the Access channel. It would not be a talking head. It would be a voiceover with graphics and things of that nature. And I think people would give me 5 for that information.
I think they would. That's a really catchy name.
Yeah.
Make it 6 minutes, please. Don't give that guy a big head.
Well, it was either give me 5 or give me fame, so I had to go with the give me 5. Study session updates. I'm hoping that this is not the end of this. I think we need to look at doing this annually. It will not be this long of a presentation, but knowing what we accomplished in 25, seeing where we are in 26 and where we're headed moving forward, I think builds transparency and confidence.
Yeah, I agree. Yearly's good.
So we're also doing some graphics showing the progress, and there will be updates on overall cost. And we're working on the overall cost that we've spent. We have that through 24, but this is actually the progress update through the end of 24. This is going up on the website tonight. You guys have the first copy of it other than communications and utility staff, and that's to show the progress. We are talking about doing progress updates more often, but I do not want to overpromise and underdeliver. So right now, this is where we're at. We're working towards a way to better track what's being accomplished during the year, so maybe we can update this semi-annually.
So going back to our discussions around the 1% sales tax reallocation. So this 46% and the 50% here, plus capacity, plus your SOP work, plus something else in there. That's the $600 million additional dollars.
And I'll have a slide to show that.
Okay. All right.
Some more on the communication plan. This is one that actually Josh wanted to do, and we'll be doing it, is a video series. And here's the 4 scripts that he's given me. These are going to be about 2 minutes because, you know, attention span sometimes is less than 5. And so those are what we're looking at. And then the projects. We've done a really good job of showing projects as they're progressing, but we wanted to take a more holistic approach and give more information. So we already give the name and the number of the project. But one of the things that we have not conveyed is what is that project trying to solve? Okay, it's an SSA remedial, but is it trying to, why? And sometimes, I'm a why person. Jeff will tell you there are sometimes I come into his office and I say, hey, Jeff, why are we doing this? I just need to know the why. And then whether I agree with it or not, I can support a why. So we're going to begin that with new projects because most of these projects are starting to wrap up. In fact, you'll remember that C5, which was the manhole rehabilitation, you guys just closed that out this past month. So that's, kind of late to the game, if you will. We're going to make sure that all of those have a map. Not all of them have had a map to go with that. We want people to know where that work's being done. Photos. Now, we're doing this already, and it's being put on social media and the website, but we're going to make sure that we get good photos. And then when a project is done, and I've seen this done in several other areas, and it really is helpful, it's a montage of photos showing it kind of from start to finish. And then at the end, it has the complete with what the cost was, all the information. So that's something that we're actually going to try to work with current projects as well, if we can. Education, we've already talked about going into schools, but one of the things that was developed is a comic book. A little comic book. You have a copy there. And it goes through, it's a Western theme, Kick It to the Can, Fog.
Again, these may seem funny, but this is part of what they've told us to do.
Yes, we had to have public. But the other thing,
I understand this. It is kind of goofy, but you've got to have explanations of what you're doing from a CMOM perspective.
Yes,
and this is it. I think we've talked about having differences of opinion with the EPA on some of these things, but they're required. I get it.
And the other thing is, when you're dealing with fog, you're looking at changing generational habits. And if you have a child that comes home and sees mommy or daddy pouring baking grease down the drain, don't do that. I'm a junior fog marshal now, and I'm going to have Marshal Pipewell come arrest you. I can tell you my daughters came home not on fog, but on water conservation and electrical conservation, and I got an earful from when they were in elementary. We're going to do some videos on fog. We already have acronyms kind of being explained because we talk SSA, SSO, CMOM, and the list can go on. We're already doing that. And then one thing that Josh came up with, and it's basically doing presentations to civic groups. I said Q4. Josh got me signed up for the middle of August, Q3, so we're actually ahead of the game on that one.
Before you go on, can you get Officer Possifer and this comic to kind of maybe have a joint comic together to kind of...
I think that's a great idea.
That's how you bridge the gap from both sides.
So to your question, this number has not really changed. That's what we're looking at. I will tell you that with the way that we're looking at now bundling projects, utilizing that risk assessment score, you are probably going to see a little bit more value engineering, and we're trying to reduce the cost. That's why we've done that. So any place where I can see that we reduce cost, that's what we're going to do. But we're definitely not going to scrimp, because the last thing I want to do is cut corners and end up in more trouble with EPA.
More people there, more bids, more opportunities.
Yes.
The lower cost.
So this $353 million right there at the top that's basically these two red amounts.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, red and yellow.
Right, red and yellow, right.
Yep.
And then the capacity is just the capacity.
Yep.
And those capacity, the capacity improvements, the scope of those, how we're upsizing the pipe, is that spelled out in the consent decree?
Yes.
Okay. So it's how have we got to that? It's $145 million or $144 million. How have we identified that with the EPA? I mean, do they know what lines we're talking about?
Yes.
Do they know what?
We had to come up with a capacity or remedial measures plan. So actually, what they have in
We're not just doing it for fun.
no.
That's what
So
I'm
what
getting
they actually had in the CD that they wanted us to do, we have said no. We're not going to do all of that because there are no SSOs in those areas.
So it's primarily related to an SSO.
So it's related to known SSOs and the hydraulic model. So the hydraulic model tells you this is an area where you may have a hydraulic issue, a capacity issue, and you need to investigate it. And we actually do that. We go and look at areas to determine, does this need to be upsized? Those that were on the list, as of right now, those are the only capacity projects that we have identified.
Okay.
And 2 of those we may end up cutting.
And we know that we've gotten that because of the initial assessment through the SSA work, yeah.
The capacity remedial measure, the actual SSO history. So, knowing that the line is too small, and through modeling that has proven. So you have the model, you prove it by what you see in the real world, and then the assessment. All of that comes into, yes, those are the projects that need to be done.
Okay.
Slide.
No, well,
Okay.
questions?
Any other questions from the board?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lance. Appreciate the update. We'll go to item number 2, a presentation of proposed AMI for the Water Utilities Department. Jeff?
I will let you
They're going to have to introduce themselves. Our friends at Amerisco are here to run through the presentation. As Lance alluded, we had several companies respond to a request for proposals, and we went through a process to rate and score them based on our professional selection of professional services guidelines. And our friends at Amerisco here came out of that day with a favorable review from our the favorable review from our no? Yes? Okay. Anyway, so I'll let you introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Yeah, not a problem. Lance gave quite a bit of detailed information there, so hopefully you guys got a break and you can hear somebody a little bit different. So Lance, thank you for that. My name's Chad Nobles. I'm with Ameresco, and I want to kind of go through this tonight. We're happy to be here, and so I will kind of take you through, unfortunately, some slides. And like I said, feel free to ask questions as we go through this process tonight. So our current understanding of the project is that you guys were looking to partner with a contractor or an engineering partner, basically, to come in, evaluate the opportunity to look at an AMI system. And we're going to talk a little bit about what an AMI system actually is tonight. You needed help with selection of that meters and the meter technologies. Lance talked a lot about what I call the dirty side. We're talking about the clean side, the drinking water, basically, the water meters and stuff that go to your house. So we also are going to look at helping create a complete scope of work, one that's turnkey, so that you guys don't have any change orders at the end of the day. That's the idea. And then obviously staff has got a full workload, as you obviously just heard tonight. And so the idea is to help offload some of that, allow us to come in and help them with this process, try to figure out what the benefits are, do an evaluation of that, and bring that back to you guys. And so that's really what we're here tonight to kind of talk through. And I want to walk you kind of a little bit through this process. This is a little bit about our team members. We've got a group that's focused on these type of projects. I've brought 2 folks with me tonight. I've got Garrett Luther in the back. He is a senior project manager for us, kind of grew up in the meter business, changing out meters down in the pits. I've also brought the engineer that's kind of been assigned to this project, Angela Hedgecock. She and I have worked together for about 17 years or so. We both have probably 20 years in this industry, and we've done, each of us, I think she told me tonight, she's done 102 of these projects. So we've got quite a bit of experience as a team, and there are other team members that you can see up here as well. The challenges, as we've talked to staff that are before you guys as a city and a board, are the following. You currently have a hybrid. You kind of have a lot of meters that you're currently manually reading. You're reading those meters manually because they've failed. The old system is either past its useful life, or the radios that we're currently on them were in a drive-by system, and they have actually just failed. They're past their useful life. You also have 35% loss and unaccounted for water, which means that there's a lot of water being wasted, which also means it's probably not revenue being collected on that water that's actually being pumped and treated and sent to the residents and the businesses.
Rating, or is that actual leaks?
So, don't know. That's a great question. So, what that gets considered is we got to do an evaluation a little bit of where that comes. That's going to be a combination of some through the meters. There's going to be some through line breaks. It's just overall your system is at 35% loss. Yes, sir. Great question, though. Yeah. And again, we won't know. Part of our evaluation is to test meters. That will tell us how much is actually being lost through the meters. The other thing is that operationally, when you manually read meters, when you don't have data at your fingertips, you get some operational efficiencies. So, in other words, you think about a move in and move out. You got to roll a truck to go get that last meter read. You got to roll a truck to basically figure out if there's a reread, and your staff's going through quite a bit of that out there in the process. And then the biggest thing is if you think about it, you guys have all probably experienced this yourself personally, but you get your water bill one month and you're like, how did I use this much water? There's no way. I don't have that data. So the lack of the availability of data is real. It affects each one of us, right? And the idea is, can we actually put in technology to where you can see the data at your fingertips and make fact-based decisions and really understand how you're using water? So these are the challenges that we want to try to address. So why fix this, right? We all talk about water. We want to show up in the morning, we want to turn that faucet on, and we want water to flow, right? And if it doesn't, we all call and we all raise all kind of Cain about that kind of stuff. But it's a critical source of life. But it also takes energy to treat water. So if we're losing water, if we're over-treating stuff, we're spending money that we shouldn't be spending. So it's something that it's the right thing to do for not only us, but also our citizens that are out there. We all have a fiduciary duty to make sure that we're holding people, that we're operating efficiently, effectively, that we've got. And with this comes what we call data integrity. Because if you have, and you can trust people that it's an accurate meter, that you can trust people that you're getting the right bill, then you have trust with staff, between citizens and between businesses, and that's what everybody's trying to shoot for as far as a goal. So it's just kind of the right thing to do. So let's talk about AMI. AMI stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. We're going to talk a little bit about what the benefits are, what it is, and hopefully I could break this down about what's changed in the industry. So in the past, we had what we call manual reads. You basically get one read a month when somebody walks out and physically reads that meter. We've transitioned to drive-by. You have an old drive-by system to where you would theoretically, that meter in the ground would have a radio on it. You'd see somebody drive down the streets and they'd get a read in. It's still one read a month, right? That's all you get as far as a data point. What's transitioned now is to what they call AMI. This is where data comes in daily. And that data that's coming in is basically in increments. And so you as a homeowner, you as a business, you could actually see whether or not you have continuous water leakage, which could potentially mean you got a leak, right? So you're able to see that data coming in and actually kind of make some proactive decisions. So that's kind of what's changed on the technology side. The other thing that's changed is the meters themselves. In the old days, what we had was what we call mechanical devices in a meter. It's positive displacement, multi-jet, those are different terminologies that are out there. Think about a meter, and inside that meter something is spinning. Whether that's a nutating disc, they call it, or it's actually got little jets that's shooting through, but something inside is moving. And that moving device, as with all mechanical devices, will wear out over time. Meters almost always fail slow. So basically what happens as meters age, as they got a lot of volume of water goes through it, they tend to slow down. Regardless of a lot of times what we think, but they all typically slow down. And so the idea is that technology has kind of gone away. In fact, a lot of the meter manufacturers have quit making mechanical meters. They only make solid state meters. Solid state meters have been around a long time. What this is basically if you look through a solid state meter, you don't see anything. There's no moving parts. It's usually using type of ultrasonic signal or either some type of magnetic signal to actually read the meter. We've been using them in process plants and chemical plants for many, many years. The difference that's changed today is battery technology. So because batteries last longer, we now have the ability to put a battery on a meter in a pit that we have enough power to power that meter over a certain number of years. And batteries now have warranties. We've got warranties on these meters up to 20 years. So you can potentially get a 20-year life cycle out of some of these meters. So,
and just replace them.
No, most manufacturers have designed for that meter gets completely replaced at that point. Yeah, because a lot of these are integrated. If you think about it, they're potted, they're sealed. They want everything so that they don't get any intrusion into that. But good question. So, but that's what's changed, and that's where we are on the technology side. How do these systems actually work? So here's kind of an overview. You have a meter. You're going to that meter's going to be in the ground. You're going to have a radio that'll sit on top of that meter. It'll actually transmit a signal, and it'll either use a licensed frequency like 450 megahertz, or some use a unlicensed frequency such as 900 megahertz, or others use a cellular solution that actually transmits out. And again, depending on what technology that manufacturer is using and what you decide to talk through, and we'll talk with staff about all the benefits of each one of those, but it transmits that signal to a data collector. That data collector, think of it as a black box that could be sitting on an elevated storage tank, it could be on a radio tower, it could be on a light pole. Every system is designed a little bit different. From there, that information is pushed out to the cloud, which it's integrated into your billing software. From your billing software, then, we can now take this data and push it to generate a bill. We can also push it to the citizens and the business users, where they actually have access through their phone, through a tablet, through some type of website to be able to see their data and then make the decisions themselves. In some cases, there are also what they call a backup, and the backup would be if you had a tornado come through here, takes down one of your data collectors, you still need to read the meters 2 or 3 days later and you hadn't got that backup, can you go drive the system? Yes, you can still manually read it, but you can also sometimes have a drive-by system. So that's just kind of a picture, an overview.
Yes, sir, if I could. If you have a data collection network crash, will these meters still operate in a fail-open state?
Yeah, so you're not physically, in the meters themselves, you're not basically closing any device inside, right? There's not a valve or anything you're open, so the water's going to flow through. It actually has the ability to read. A lot of them, I'm thinking back to some of the specs, some of them hold data for 96 days, on the actual device itself that's in the ground, and then it's pushing data out as well. So you still would be able to get a manual read off of it. You'll still be able to have multiple days of data until you get that system back up and going. Good question, though. So let's talk about some of the benefits, and I like to kind of tell a quick story, if I can, about the benefits. You could see, and I'll let you read some of those up there, but we all have got folks that we know that are on fixed incomes. We've got people that are concerned about their water bill. It's hard for them when they get a water bill that's $100 versus $75. It hurts, right? We also have all probably, and you've probably got the call about, my water bill's way too high. I have no idea I do it. We don't have answers today, as I mentioned earlier, on how to help that person figure out what's going on with their water. With AMI, they're going to get the data, which means they're going to be able to see, maybe you have a leaky toilet, and you really didn't know that it was using hundreds of gallons of water a day. And so now you'll see that on a profile, a bar chart that says, hey, it's still using water. It never shuts off, but I'm gone. Maybe you take a vacation and you're like, hey, I want to, you set up a leak alert to where, or a high consumption alert. If you don't want to hit that threshold of hitting that $100 bill and you're using water and you're getting closer and it's projecting out to say, hey, maybe I should cut back on my irrigation. Maybe you didn't even know your irrigation system was going off every night at 10 o'clock because you had a power failure. It is. It's actually logging data the whole time. And it's actually sending it over to the system, which then you can sign up to get access to that data. And you can set yourself to have a text alert, an email alert that says, hey, I got a leak going on, or I need to go figure out what's going on. Huge benefits. Big benefits on the side of the staff as well, because now they can proactively look and help citizens should they decide to do that, to check these type of things. They can also figure out where, hey, I know that I pumped X amount of gallons of water down here, and now I can see 24 hours later exactly what was billed and collected from that light. So it's lots of different benefits when it comes to AMI. Ultimately, the benefit is at the citizen level. When you have that data to make decisions yourself, which you can't make today, on how you want to use water, how you want to conserve water, how you can answer the question about why did I use water? Did I even use that much water? You can now see that data. And again, all the things that I've talked about, these are different screenshots and different things from some of the different software that allows you to actually see that data. So what's the process to go through to kind of where we go and how we get from point A to point B? So this all falls underneath Arkansas Code 1911. It basically started with a request for qualifications. We were actually competitively awarded this process. We're here tonight to talk about the next step. That next step would be to sign some type of professional services or project development agreement. In that agreement, we would have basically a scope of work to go do this investment grade audit. And that investment grade audit I'll talk briefly about here in a second, but it's basically to go figure out what type of meter, do some meter testing, we get scope, we go do field survey, put boots on the ground, we spend some time looking at all this stuff to come back to you and bring you basically a cost benefit analysis, an ROI, a scope, a price, everything that's associated with this. And then you have another decision point. We would bring that back to the board, and you would be able to make a decision whether you implement that or not, or either you basically just pay us for the initial fee. And then, should you decide to move forward with implementation, the legislation requires that we guarantee basically something as part of this project. And we would guarantee meter accuracy, which then translates into revenue or dollars for you. And we have the ability to guarantee that up to a 20-year period according to the term of the legislation. So that's kind of the big picture of the process. I'm going to kind of break some of this down. Where you're at with your staff right now is every city, every utility that we work with starts at a different place. You have different geography, you have different terrain, you got different staff levels, different staff people. And so we want to typically figure out how we can help you, and we want to customize the solution for you as far as looking at the different options. There's tons of different meter manufacturers out there. That's just a simple name, some of them, but all of that depends on having us working side by side. And our philosophy is to be an extension of your staff, be able to help them. We want you to see us as kind of the easy button. We've done a bunch of these. We know what works. We don't manufacture a single meter out there. We've put them all in. We can talk about the pros and cons of all those different things. Our goal is to sit with you and on the same side of the table and help you make these decisions that are really tough. Here's some of the projects that we've done. These are 3 of them that are similar in size to what you guys are. As you can see, the number down on the bottom is actual annual savings and revenue dollars that were used to help offset the cost. In fact, all 3 of these projects had no impact on a rate increase. They paid 100% of the project out of the savings and revenue that was generated from the inaccurate meters. That's hard not to say, right? You don't ever have a project like that. So it's kind of hard. My dad always gives me a hard time. He's like, I don't know how you don't do more of these. And I'm like, I don't know either. But these are real numbers, right? And the idea is that each one of these has its own unique system, its own unique losses, some 35, some less than that, right? And I'm going to show you a slide in a minute of kind of some of those further breakout. But these are some of the projects that we've done. So what does the timetable look like? And I'm going to try to kind of hit you. We start with spending some time with your staff, really understanding their goals, making sure we understand each department's goals, how you're reading meters, what's affected, what your field systems look like. That usually takes us about a month. And same time we're doing that, we start this design and engineering phase where we're looking at different technologies. We're deploying fields staff to go survey meter boxes. We're looking at pipes. We're looking at how curb stops, different things that are actually in the field that all add up to cost. And so we do different workshops with staff to look at different progresses on what we're actually testing and what we're finding in the field to make sure they're on board with all that. We then would, like I said, we would bring that different proposal back. We'd put out RFPs. We'd get bids. We'd get pricing for any of the materials and different things like that. Bring it back in a transparent model to allow staff to kind of pick and choose what they would like to go forward with. Once they've made a decision, once everybody's worked out, we would then look at funding options for those solutions, bring that back as a package to you guys, to the board, and you would have a decision. Should you make a decision to move forward with the project, then you're looking at anywhere from 12 to 24 months to do a complete change out and execution of the project, and then, of course, a guarantee up to potentially 20 years for the project. The deliverables, as I've mentioned a couple different times, I try to sum them up here. We're going to help you figure out the best equipment and get the real cost for that. It'll have an accurate scope of work. This is one of the biggest challenges. Every single database we've ever come across has errors in it. And so we have folks that are on the data side that are going to focus on nothing but the data, looking at the data of it. We have field folks that are looking at the field side. We compare the two. We create an accurate scope of work that we can live behind and actually go out and get firm bids on. And we spend more time up front doing that so that we don't come back to you with more than one price. That's the idea, is that we don't have change orders. In fact, I've had a mayor tell me one time, he said, I've never had a project that didn't have a change order except for your project. And so we're kind of proud of that. A lot of our projects, we know that the meter differences, the quantities are a little bit different than what's in the field, but we try to make sure that if we do have a change order, it's a no-cost change order, because we're doing some work up front to make sure that this works. We will determine revenue loss. So as you know, if meter's only reading 80% accurate and you're not billing it, then you're going to have some revenue pickup from an inaccurate meter. So we'll show you what that looks like. But we have found that one of the things that this is a project, and it's the only project you will do ever probably, that touches every single resident and every single business in your town. Every single one of them are going to get touched if they've got a meter, right? So in order to do that, we have to educate them on what's going to take place. And so we build a citizen engagement strategy that comes into place to help educate them. You talked about videos earlier. We've done videos, we've done town hall meetings, we've done mock-ups of different things to let everybody understand exactly what takes place when we go to your house and change out your meter and what it looks like. The end of the day, I'm going to give you a firm fixed price. It'll have the ROI. It'll be something we'll be wanting to stand behind. Here's kind of the next slide, should be kind of some of the examples of our public outreach. These are different documents. We had one city we worked with, they used their GIS system, and as we were changing out meters, those dots changed to different colors so people would know kind of where we're at on town. We've done different videos, different flyers, social media posting. All of that is basically available. We just kind of work with you to figure out, and with your social media. It sounds like you got a great guy in the back that knows how to do that stuff, so he'll be helping us do this as well. So we always get questioned, where's the money? How's the funding come from? So conceptually, there's two things, as I mentioned. You have right now mechanical meters, and these are pictures of your actual meters that are out there, that we don't know yet, but we feel confident that they're inaccurate at some level. We don't know what that level of inaccuracy is until we go test some. But the idea is that we replace a meter that's reading 90% accurate with 100%, we capture an additional 10% of revenue. You've been pumping free water, basically, to the citizens. Now they would have to collect for that. The second thing is on the operational side, manual meter reading costs a whole lot more than automating that. If I don't have to roll trucks to do a reread, if I don't have to roll trucks to do a move in and move out, if I don't have to roll trucks every month to read it and I can push a button and read it, all that is drastically less expensive than basically sending manpower out there. It also allows you, because I'm sure you're like every other city we talk to take that staff that was reading meters and reallocate them to do all the other project lists that you have up there. We also see that a lot of times you can't get rid of all meter folks in the meter department. You will have to have a meter technician, is what we call it, because there'll be vandalism, there'll be new meters that have to be put in, there'll be some damages associated with it, warranty failures. You've got to have somebody still go out there. But the idea of those manual meter readers, if that's all they were doing, that job goes away. They get reallocated to do other things within the city. Just another way to look at this, everything in gray, you think of it before, you have a certain amount of revenue that comes from water sales, a certain amount comes from sewer. Obviously, if you get a more accurate meter in, it's actually reading what's flowing through. You capture that a little bit of delta difference there. Not everybody is going to have an inaccurate meter. You may have an accurate meter, but his may be 2% off, and so we want to capture that over the course of the thing. And then, of course, the operational side. And the idea is that hopefully we find enough to offset all of the cost. If not, it should offset a large majority of the cost. Here's a smaller type example of just another funding mechanism. If you had roughly $5 million in annual revenues, if you think about that, and you were losing 3% of that through your meters, that's $150,000. It may not seem a lot, but if you take that over a 10, 20-year period, it's a big number. And if you look at something that maybe it cost, that project of that size may cost $1.5 to $2.6 million, you could be looking at, a 10 to 17-year payback. If the meter has a 20-year warranty, it's a no-brainer at that point. Let's go ahead and do it. So this is just another way to look at the funding example. These are real-life projects that we've done. So everything on the left are meter testing that we've done. So you see small, those would be residential meters, 1 inch and below. Intermediate would be 1.5 inch and 2 inch, so they could be on a small school, some other business. And then large would be 3 inch and larger. We test individually every 3 inch and larger meter. If we go test those, then we obviously, those have different profiles, for every one. Typically, a household's going to use water all pretty much the same way. So we lump those into a category themselves. But you can see, for instance, Mesquite, when we did Mesquite, the residential meters tested out pretty good. They were only 97%, right? But those commercial meters that were at 84%, that's what funded a large portion of that bill. We had large meters that were reading 30%. So we had businesses that were getting a lot of free water that didn't make sense. You can take Conroe, the intermediate meters, the 1.5 inch and 2 inch. They were at 88%, but the small meters were at 91%. So across the board in Conroe, we had kind of some differences. But again, the numbers on the right, those are annual revenue increases for these particular projects. So Mesquite, 42,000 accounts, had roughly $2.3 million that was being uncollected that they should have been collecting for the water. So where can you get money? How are these projects? There's lots of different ways. We want to help you with that. If you remember the first slide, I had a guy there named Tim Farkas. He is an ex-banker. He sits on our staff. We're not a financial advisor. We don't want to be at all, but we understand your financing capabilities, and so we'll work with you to kind of make suggestions, talk to you about, and we'll work closely with your FA to go figure out what the best funding mechanism to try to get the lowest, if you go to decide to borrow these funds, what's the lowest amount for that. We see a lot of these done through capital leases, whether they're taxable or tax exempt. We also see some people will do bonds to issue these projects. It's totally up to you on how you do it. I will say that we always look for grants and different subsidies. There's not a lot out there for these type of projects. We were hoping to get some more of those to come out, but they don't. They're just not there. If they do, they're very hard to get, and there's lots of strings tied to them. And so we typically find out that, it's easier pretty much just kind of working through a different process, especially when you look at the value of time. If you're losing revenue, you want to get that resolved very quickly. So what are the next steps? The next steps for us is we typically ask for a project development agreement. That gets us started. And we start moving forward with that. That will allow us to do that audit and that getting all that pricing, do that meter testing that we talked about, do our field surveys, developing the scope of work, helping staff with equipment selection, all of the stuff that we need to understand what this project looks like and to present that data back to you. At that point, as I mentioned, phase 2 would basically be either the implementation should you decide to move forward with that, and that's where you would basically have us come in and we would manage the entire process accordingly. So with that, I'm going to go to this last slide and ask for any questions. This is a slide we used in our shortlist interview. It just talks about some of our partnership benefits, and I am here to answer, and my staff is also here to answer any questions that you may have.
Director Kemp.
Thank you, Director Settle. 2 questions just come to mind, at least on the onset here. How long has your company been around? I know you talked about that at the beginning, but through all the information, could you remind me again?
Yeah, so Ameresco has been around since 2001. We went public in 2011. Our owner actually had started a previous business that does the same thing and sold it off years ago, so he's been in the business a long time.
Yeah, I just asked.
But for us, it's 2001.
Okay, good. How long does the change out usually take for a city our size?
Yeah, so we would estimate, when we can, the nice thing about us is we can kind of man up accordingly. We want to work with staff to figure out, we don't want to overwhelm them, on different things, because obviously if we're changing out tons of meters, but usually on a project like this, we would estimate anywhere probably from 16 months to 24 months. We can condense that down depending on what we're doing. If we end up having to do, as you know, your town, you've got a lot of the small metal boxes that are in town. If we talked about it a little bit today, if we end up having to replace a lot of boxes, that can draw that schedule out a little bit on the long side. If we just replace the meter, then it goes a little bit faster.
One final thing actually that came to mind. So we talk about increased revenue. Could you speak to the idea that, obviously that's citizens paying more money for water. So when cities do this, I'm sure the city directors actually hear frustration because, my water bill was this, and even if I'm seeing the data, when you talk about that citizen engagement, Is there ways that you guys come alongside the city and help explain that? Or do you even find that the process is more accurate in general and that water usage goes down, but it's more accurate? I mean, could you speak to this real situation that's going to happen?
And it's very real. It's a very real situation that comes up. So here's what happens. If you think about where you are today, when you are trying to balance your budget and do all the projects that you have, right? You are treating a certain amount of water, you're pumping a certain amount of water, you have a fixed cost, you have to have a balanced budget. When you don't have a balanced budget, what happens? You have to pass a rate increase. If your meter is 80% and his meter is 99%, it's unfair to you or unfair to him because he's really paying the water that you're using, the 20% difference, if your meter was at 8%. So what we do as a city, we raise water rates. So literally in the Woodlands, what they were trying to do is avoid a water rate increase. But in order to do that, they had to go capture the revenue that was going to everybody. So the idea of these projects is it makes it fair. All we want is for everybody to pay for the water that they're using. That's just what you want as a city, is you want to be fair. You want to know that you're being treated the same way you're being treated. So we do education of telling folks, hey, yes, you may have a meter that your bill goes up, but the average person's bill is not going to go up. If you looked at some of those residential numbers, it's not on the residential side. We typically see this in the commercial, and the large meter side is where that goes up. Why? Because those meters tend to fail a lot faster, And so when I talked about that 30% meter in Mesquite that read it, I mean, we're talking another $100,000 a month just in that one account. You, as staff, go have that conversation with that business. We have school districts. A lot of those intermediate meetings are on schools. Sometimes schools don't, have all that. But it's just a process of being fair. It's part of being that fiduciary responsibility that we have as citizens to make sure that we're doing a good job. We're going to help with that. And again, your citizens want you as a staff to be effective in reading the meter. So if you can lower your reading cost and you can lower the way you operate, that's a win. And maybe you don't have to pass a larger rate. Because what happens if you can't balance your budget, you're going to raise water rates in order to pay for that cost.
Director Martin?
Yeah, you mentioned all these meters on one of your slides there. What's the average cost of a meter? I mean, if you had to kind of break it down, we talking 1,000?
No, I mean, large meters, yes. But if you're talking residential meters, you could be, $350 to $400, $500 bucks. Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to think about this, the cost, the total cost of
a project like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, if you've got, 40,000, 35,000 meters? Yeah. Yeah, if you say 40,000 meters, I would say we have projects on the low side that average around $500 an endpoint. We have on the high side that average $1,200 an endpoint. And all that depends on what the shape of your system's like.
So if we said 750, let's just throw that number out. It's $30 million.
That's right.
So that's your total cost. And we had another presentation from another company, the end of 2024, Omnia. What happened with that? Did we move forward with that?
I'd say what we did was we went through this process here to evaluate many companies, and that particular company didn't resubmit a proposal.
Did not?
No.
Okay.
Anything else, Neil?
That's good for me right now.
George?
Yeah, that's a good presentation.
There you go.
Good presentation.
Thanks.
One of the better ones I've seen in a long time. You know your homework.
I've been doing this a while. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the upfront costs to the city?
Great question. So we like to have skin in the game with you. Okay. And what we mean by that is I talked about that project development agreement. What we consider that in that agreement is a walk-away fee. That walk-away fee is something that we'll work with staff on. We've talked a little bit about it. We haven't lined that out, but that is generated on how many meters we actually test. That's what drives that cost. Mm-hmm. For a city like this, I would say, and again, we're not in the business like a typical engineering firm is, where they come in and want to do a study, they're making a profit on that. For us, we're coming in and trying to cover at least some of our costs because we want to know if you're really interested in doing this. Otherwise, we want to move on. We got other things we want to do, right? So we want to basically have you, if we told you we do it for free, everybody would sign up, and we're not sure who would do it or not. Mm-hmm. These projects like this, for a city like this, we're probably going to be somewhere between $50,000 to $125,000 for a walkaway fee.
Upfront costs.
And again, we hope you never pay that, because at the end of the day, that money gets rolled into the overall project should you decide to get forward. So we're not asking you to come up and pay us for that right now. It just gets rolled into the overall construction project. That's how the legislation basically works.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if I ask a question? So I'm going to go with George's ask is, you talk about skin in the game. So obviously you're going to get some benefit on a yearly basis for what you save, right? Is that part of this equation?
No, sir.
So
we guarantee a certain meter accuracy. We then use 3 years worth of historical consumption data to project what your revenue's losing.
Okay.
And we put that with your financial folks and we show them that. We don't take any percentage of that.
You don't take any percentage. So the
No,
$2 million you showed Woodland Savings, the city of Woodland gets that. You don't get any part of that at all.
That's correct. In fact, they actually have been exceeding that savings every
So
year.
it's up to the city to determine how to fund the meters.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we work with you to kind of help you with different funding options. Most of these are done through some type of tax lease. Some do certificates of participation. Other states call them certificates of obligation. But we're going to.
You're just an engineering firm, get paid a whatever fee, and then you guys are done.
We're the prime contract. Well, we have to be on the hook for that meter accuracy. So if we come back in future years.
Is there any yearly fee to the city or anything else like that?
So yes, if you have us come back and test these, right?
Okay.
So if you come back and test every single year, right?
Okay.
Then we might have a small $30,000 to $40,000 fee to come back and do all these meter tests. But you're buying brand new meters every time, and so you're getting new meters. If you have us test every couple of years, like some of the legislation allows us to test, says they have to test one time in a 5-year period, right?
Okay.
So I'll give you a case in point. We came back in one city, had 6,500 meters. We tested in year 3. The meters, we guaranteed for that city 98.5% accuracy. They tested at 98.3. We replaced 6,500 meters on our own dime.
Okay.
So the idea, that's the guarantee, right? And if the other option for us is to make up the revenue difference based on that accuracy and those consumption values, but again, we knew we were going to be paying every year for the next 15 years. We found a product failure at that particular manufacturer, so we basically.
So your
replaced
company
it.
does not take any of the savings, profits, dollars, anything of that, increased water sales, increased sewer sales, you get none of that.
We're like a prime contractor giving you a firm fixed price,
Okay.
and then you basically collect and keep all the savings from that. It's not a shared savings program whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Director Good?
No, I was just, Administrator Dingman answered the question on the project that we had presented last year, fall of last year, and that, part of that was the board wanted to have other options, and we had other ESCOs approach us about wanting to be able to participate in an RFQ, and that was the point of the state laws. We had to do an actual RFQ to do that. So that's actually under Administrator Dingman we have done.
So that was a great presentation, also great information. So now what's the next step? I mean, because we pretty much have an idea of what upfront cost is going to be. We also know where we are with the general fund, where we're talking about, watching what we spend. So now what's next step?
So the next step is, if the board wishes, we will work with them to come up with a scope for the phase 1 for the study and bring that back to the board during a voting meeting for your approval, because this is something I feel the board needs to have a full say in. That's where I see it.
Okay, thank you, Lance. Appreciate it.
Lance, we have test benches going.
Yeah, and that's something that we can actually, as we get these installed, he was talking about testing.
Yeah.
We actually do have a test bench that will allow us to do the solid state meters now.
Okay.
And that's something that we will be able to do on our own as well. So to the annual fee, we will be able to pull those, and that's part of the requirements. If you're following the best management practices of the American Water Works Association, they have a certain percentage that you test every year. You pull them at random, and then so we will have that. And then if we find that the percentage is off, if the accuracy is off, then that's where we can come back notify them. They can come in, do their own independent testing on those meters to see that, yes, the meters are not reading accurately, and go forward.
So is the board concurrence to let Lance and the team move forward with at least bringing back an agreement to the board to vote on?
I am.
Yeah, I am too. I'm kind of impressed with this deal.
I mean, we obviously got to look at how this is going to get funded, how it affects our debt service coverage ratio.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all got to get factored in.
I concur 100%.
So, and I think we need financial numbers outside of this. We need an understanding of what that's going to look like with this.
Go ahead.
I know that's out of your scope, but we got to be able to see what that looks like.
Yeah, and so just, you made a comment, when I talked about a lot of the cities that we work with and utilities use tax-exempt lease for this type of thing, that's because it doesn't affect their bonding capacity or ratio. Well, because there's a non-appropriations clause, and this is, even though it's debt, it's being backed by additional revenue that we're kind of, so it offsets it, and it's a self-funded type project, so that's what you got to look for.
So it doesn't hit their operational budgets?
It doesn't hit because it's revenue that you're not getting right now. So it's literally new revenue, and if you use a tax-exempt lease type agreement, it can have a non-appropriations clause in there, which means it doesn't typically, most of your FAs don't see that as debt. And again, that's up to your FA and rating, but we see a lot of that. Yeah, he'll be working with them to do that, but we see that a lot of times. But again, it's up to you how you do it.
And one other thing, after the very first portion of this, the study, if the return on investment is not there, then this is dead, because there's no sense in us doing something that's going to cost more money. We're looking at ways of bringing in enhanced revenue and saving operational cost. We're not looking at just doing a project to do a project.
Any other comments?
So am I hearing that this project does not affect the debt coverage ratio?
It's totally up to how your FAs and auditors, but in a lot of cases that we work with, it depends on how you fund that, right? And we won't know how much revenue you're losing until we test meters. We have to go test meters, and your staff's already got a challenge in the fact that they got failed meters going on right now. So they've got operational challenges they're going to have to address regardless of whether you do this project or not. There's going to have to be something done. But this is just a way to help offset that cost.
I'm in a concurrence for a proposal, but I will, before there's like a final vote for dollars, I'm going to want to know the answer to that question.
And that will come as a result of our study.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say that when we get that report, we will probably be back in here for a study session prior to bringing something that would be a contract to change out meters, implement AMI. All of that, again, will come back to the board. This is not a one and done. This is just for the initial study aspect that I just needed to know if the board had an appetite to do that.
Okay. I would be good with that, another study session on that.
Thank you very much, Chad. Thank you very much. Lance, thank you very much for being here. Thank you. With that, we'll go to item number 3, a preliminary agenda for the July 8th. Not next week, but July 8th will be our next board meeting. So any comments or concerns about the, Jeff?
Thank you. No, there's just a reminder, there's no meeting next Tuesday or on July the 1st, that week of Independence Day. The next Board of Directors meeting, as Director Settle said, is Tuesday, July the 8th. The city offices are closed on Friday, July the 4th, in observance of Independence Day. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we were looking at strategic planning workshop and a mid-year budget review Tuesday, July the 29th. We had some feedback from the board previously that we wanted to try to stick with Tuesdays, and so we wanted to try to dedicate that Tuesday evening for strategic planning and budget review. And since that is not a regular study session, and we need 4 directors to call for that to be 6 p.m. at the Blue Lion right here.
On the 29th?
On the 29th.
I'll make a motion for a special study session and planning session on July 29th.
Very. I'll be a 4th then after that.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else? No. Any other item? Not? I need a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, bud.